other thing that you could think of which could be a public good, a digital public good? A database. Okay, but how, I suppose the important thing is that, give me an example. I am actually not aware of openly available database which is there. I mean, it could be interesting, but what do you think is... Okay, yes, okay, fine, yes, okay. So basically collections of data which are openly available for anybody to use is definitely a digital public good. What's the biggest source of such data, maybe? Okay, NASI Yatra is certain. But now let's think bigger. Is Wikipedia a digital public good? Okay, think about it. It's really not some. So I think that, I think India has obviously taken the lead as far as doing lots of interesting things in digital public goods, which are called as India Stack, kind of loosely called as India Stack. But there are digital public goods all over the world, right? And it's not just. And I think that you need to think about something which is created, which is freely usable by people. Yes. Yes, but that is somewhat of, so therefore I would actually, there are actually open mapping solutions that are there. Google Maps is interesting because it is obviously everybody uses it. So it becomes a de facto standard. But the truth is that, for example, and as a consumer we never see it. But for example, it was maybe 2 years ago. Now we come, of course, today the topic of the entire session today is AI, right? So let's see. Now one question is, does someone want to, after all the talks that have happened today, want to help define what AI is? Is somebody younger wants to take a cut of that? Okay. Okay, that's nobody? Anybody brave? Of course. And there is no correct. I would be the last person to claim that there is a defined definition for AI. I think, it has been true certainly from the year of 2010, I think, is when deep learning for the first time became something that people said. That's the first time there was this thing known as ImageNet. It was the first time that deep learning actually became something that people were. Of course, the field of AI has existed for 50 years before that, but I meant ImageNet, yes. Did I say something else? Okay, I said ImageNet, is what I mean. I meant ImageNet. And so, okay, and after that was actually the beginning of what we call as deep learning. But since then, in the last 15 years, things have basically, exploded, right? And so therefore, and of course, something, and I think that, first there were obviously, there was a whole bunch of things happening in vision, then many more things happened in natural language processing, and I think, and I think this whole, and without going into the history of all of these things, something happened last year, which kind of, I think, created a lot of excitement. And so, can someone talk about what that was that happened last year? Okay, ChatGPT. Okay. Okay, what is ChatGPT? Can someone answer that question? What is ChatGPT and why is it important? Or maybe it's not important. Anybody wants to answer that question? Okay, it's an AI chatbot. And why is that different? I mean, there were AI chatbots, 15 years before that, right? We don't know that. I'm not even making that value judgment here. I'm not even making that value judgment here. All I'm saying is that what did it do for the first time? Okay. And do you think that we could have made we could have made a database call and actually gotten access to information before, right? What's different? Yes. Okay. So that's good. So therefore it is, you can ask your questions in natural language and the answers are also in natural language. So does that mean that, and I don't know the answer to this question, so I think the reason that it excited people is that it was giving answers, truthful or not, that only humans could give before, right? And that's really what was the change, right? And I think that and I think that's really one of the things that's so exciting and so challenging about this, right? I mean, because right now, if you actually, and I think we're going to talk both from some of the risks and some of the benefits of something like that, is that, let's say, yes. Actually not true. Not true? Yeah. Maybe they weren't using ChatGPT, no? or they didn't know how to use it right. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think it is very important without discrimination and yeah. No. Yes. Yes. No, you are absolutely right, and I think that I think I've taken from this definition from the DPG Alliance, which is the official definition. DPG, but then there are certain properties, and especially when certain properties are there, in general, a digital public good would use open source. Now that's not true, right? Clearly, Aadhaar, for example, is not open source, right? I mean, we have used open source software, but it's not open source. Or the other thing is, I think, as someone said, many of these massive sets of data that are available, they typically use open data, right? Think about something like Wikipedia. It's a significant amount of open data that you're talking about. Now, does that mean, now clearly, as we see, like, if you look at the latest at ChatGPT has two problems, right? One problem is it is not open source, right? We don't even know actually, what ChatGPT is actually one of the most closely guarded secrets in the valley. In the valley. But the second thing is that ChatGPT was trained on a massive amount of data. That is very clear, right? But we don't know what data it was trained on, which is interesting, right? So therefore now there is this collection of things which used, and certainly legally, we're not sure that in the end that we assume that it was done legally. But the point is, we still don't know really what it was doing. And in the end, see, the benefits of AI models are so significant that we have to use them. But then, under what constraints, in what way? And I think that is the part of the question that I'm trying to answer here. This is not what I normally talk about, but that's what I'm talking about today. And I think that how do you kind of establish standards and establish contents when there is a technology that is this powerful and actually, not just this powerful, it is also not super hard for multiple people to do. In fact, that's what's so exciting in the world of large language models and foundation models today, that in the last 8 months or 9 months since ChatGPT has come, there are so many people doing so many things. And I don't know how many people have heard about this GPT-4B model. I mean, I don't know if people have heard about it, right? Or even seen. Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay, we'll do that. I'm not sure I'm that qualified to do it, but I think I can do that. So I think one of the questions that's been asked out front here is, how many of you know what the difference between machine learning and deep learning is? Okay. So first, someone wants to answer. Yes, why don't you answer? Or yes. And what is machine learning? And what is exactly?
By itself, by availability of data. So, machine learning deep learning using self-learning.
So, I personally, and there are others who may want to correct. One of the things that I think that is in the right direction, but I think the key difference between machine learning is that machine learning typically uses well-engineered features. Okay, that you're actually trying to explicitly create some features and then use those features to predict something else. Okay, so therefore, I think typically in machine learning you tend to, while in deep learning, there are multiple differences where you're actually using the raw data and the network by itself, okay, is able to train to solve a particular problem. That's one kind of thing. Now, the one thing that you said is that I think maybe you were trying to mention the difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning, right? Supervised learning is, I give you a number of examples, and maybe it's a classification problem or maybe it's a regression problem, and I don't know, here we're going down a more complex thing, but the question is that you are given some examples and the network is trained using those examples, right? So therefore, one of the most complex things when you are trying to do supervised learning is that time-consuming things is that you have to create these examples, right? You have to, and there are examples that, now, it is, the interesting thing is, and I think that most of the recent advances, especially in recent advances, have been where people have moved from supervised learning to a little thing known as self-supervised learning. In the end, you're actually still doing a supervised learning, but you're not solving the problem that you finally want to solve. You're actually trying to solve some other problem whose answer is known, is well known, so therefore you don't need to actually spend a lot of human effort to actually do that. So, I mean, I don't know, one of the most seminal papers was a paper called BERT from Google in 2017. And what they did was the interesting thing was, they, instead of training the model on a specific task, right, like answering a question or telling a sentiment or doing it, what they actually did was, they actually took, they gave it a task where they gave it all the documents that are there in the web, and then what they did was they masked out a few words, and the job of the network was to predict those words. So now this you do very cheaply because you know the answer, right? And so therefore the entire process now would suddenly have a much larger amount of data to actually pre-train your model, and that's now become most foundational models that we talk about always have what is known as pre-training, where you are training it not on any specific task, you are training it on something very generic, and that's something that, for example, if you look at GPT, the GPT classroom models, any basically kind of text, I assume pretty much, even though GPT is a text model, I believe that they have taken all audio and converted to text also, and there is all kinds of, and basically everything is used to train the model. Now that's what's known as pre-training, and pre-training is something that needs a huge amount of compute. And tends to, I mean, depending on, and these models are getting bigger and bigger, and so it's something that as models get bigger, you end up, the compute required to do some of these kinds of things increases significantly. But the truth is that, but once you have this pre-trained model, that pre-trained model has to actually be fine-tuned, okay, to solve a particular problem. And there you tend to you can either do supervised fine-tuning, which is actually using real examples for the problem that you want to solve, or you could do interesting things like, but what we have found out, and this is kind of the interesting thing, is that as you make the models bigger, okay, the amount of data you need to fine-tune it to do a certain task actually comes down. And that is a very, very interesting property that these things have. And I think some people have said that really in the end it looks like these models have become what is known as like a universal function approximator. And that is a crazy thing to actually have to think about, but I think that the amount of effort taken to make it work on a certain task is significant. Anyway, but we were talking about digital public goods and got on to AI. So I think it's interesting, right? I think, and here I'm talking a little bit from all digital public goods are actually designed to meet certain key indicator standards, and I think most of these things are really what make them open. Now, if you want to think about this context in AI, right, how do I actually make something AI a digital public good? I do want it to be. I desperately do want it to be a digital public good. But if you want it to be a digital public good, can it meet these requirements? Some of them are actually quite simple to meet. But one of the interesting things that is actually an understanding of the data that was used to create these models, right? And how does that relate to both data protection, data security, as well as data privacy, right? These are some of the key things that when you actually want to use something like AI and make it part of a digital public good, then you actually need to kind of understand these things, and I think these are challenges because the various teams are off to the races. They're doing various things, and I think that that's very important. That when we think, and if we have to think of AI as a public good, then we have to take a slightly different view on this particular context. So, yes. I have 5 minutes? Okay. Okay. Then maybe I should say. So I think the interesting thing is this, right? If you look at AI, right, there are 3 kinds of things, right? So the AI has now the ability, and literally, you see it of basically taking all data that exists and ingesting it and making it part into the AI model, and then we are creating models that are larger than ever and using a very significant amount of compute power to do so. So it's important, right? So therefore we need to, as if I'm going to use AI as a digital public good, I need to align these three things, right? And by the way, one of the biggest things, the biggest breakthroughs in ChatGPT was the fact, and why they felt that people feel that answers are better, is actually this concept of alignment, and alignment to a human preference. And that was actually one of the last breakthroughs which happened, which was called reinforcement learning based on human feedback, actually provided the last, what you call that, the piece in there that of course, I think there are lots of things that have happened since there, but going into that is probably beyond the scope of what we are talking today. And I think that, of course, the other part is mitigate the availability, right? I think one of the things that's going to happen is interesting, right? I think for many years we have been saying data is the new oil, but I think the LLMs have actually proved this. They're actually taken in all the data and they can do actually pretty amazing things. And I think that's something that understanding of how this availability of data, right, to actually build LLMs better, and also have the guardrails. Because how many of you know about hallucinations in AI? How many of you know about hallucinations? Who knows about hallucinations? Anybody wants to talk about hallucinations? Do you know what a hallucination is in general? Yeah, so tell me what is a hallucination? Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer. No, but in the context of a large language model, do you know what a hallucination is? Yeah, so it tells things that are simply not true, right? It imagines things, and these large language models are certainly capable of doing those kinds of things. Now, in certain areas, maybe it's, it obviously you cannot have any hallucinations, right? Especially if you're trying to think. Yeah. It's not available. Open data is not available. It's not available, so we want to make it. Yeah. Yeah, in addition to that, no. So I think two things that are, and I think and we, as we study this, we understand better ourselves every day. There is obviously the models. The models are actually fairly open, fairly well known. There's not, now there is new magic that keeps coming, but that actually goes into the open source very, very quickly. The second part is the data. Now data we have not, there is systematically in the world, there is nothing that is there which actually gets data in a form that is, and then not just, it's interesting, just to given the data, how you actually massage the data to make something that is effective is still, there are many tricks. And I think most of the companies, including who are actually working in these areas, have figured out some trick on how to actually transform the data into some form so that they can actually gain some benefit in this area. Yes, I think so. Yes. No, absolutely. And I think that, so I think these are, and I think that, but both these two things are important. Now, I think I'll skip because we have our last, so I think the interesting thing that, we are here in India, right? And I think that if you look in Silicon Valley, all kinds of crazy things are happening with these large language models. But I think what we can do is, I think one of the things that there are obviously going to be people who are going to build these extremely large models running after, artificial general intelligence. And I think that obviously that's one way that you can go for, but the kinds of the investment and the things to do those kinds of things are actually much more at a very different order of magnitude. But I think India should actually figure about differentiated data. Okay, what does differentiated data means? Data that is Indian in nature, right? And I think it can be anything. It can be our classical text, or it can be a YouTube video made by people explaining so many things. We are the biggest creators of that kind of content. So, and actually differentiated Indian data, right? And how do you actually leverage those kinds of data to do things? The other thing which I believe is, while you look at things like artificial general intelligence, they are going to use extremely large models and extremely complex things. But I think you can have small-sized models which do specific tasks and do it even better than GPT-4, and that's something that's important to do. And of course, I think this is something that I have said for at least a year, maybe more than a year, that we need to have the compute in the country as basically as significant amount of, because and if you don't have the compute, that is table stakes. You cannot play this game, and if you don't have the compute, and the truth is that the way the compute is set up today in the country, it is not. Yeah, we don't have access to the people the young kids who can do this. Of course. No. See, I do not believe that we are talking about it being available as free. I think it should be available at cost. It should be available, and there are enormous amount of data sets that are here in the country which can actually be, which no one knew how to use before, and now we can use these kinds of things, and these kind of things that we must have this as you know. I mean, I don't know. Today, people know about the GPU wars, right? So therefore, literally getting a GPU is like finding striking gold, right? That's some of the high-end GPUs that are there, and certainly in India, it's very, very restricted, very restricted. And of course, I think in India we have all the people. Actually, I think that, and as I've been looking at this space in the last couple of years, we have people to do all the pieces here, and we can actually, and I think the goal really in India should become that, we have to be the largest users of AI. Okay, that's actually rather than, and as a nation, if we become the largest users of AI, all these other things, and how to use AI will be very different from the GPTs of the world, and that's something that. And the last slide, is, because I myself am changing from a person working on DPGs for so many years to actually, doing a startup. It's nothing to do with my startup, but I think that, I want to talk about at least the thought process of the things that we think are important. That we actually should create three things. The first thing is, of course, we need to create what is a large language model app platform. Yeah. So I think one of the things that is important, right, is we want everybody to use AI, right? When you want everybody to use AI means an AI app should be created by somebody who does not know how to program. That is literally and that's when I can basically, so right now, how many of you have used ChatGPT? Okay, very good. How many of you have actually written a prompt? Okay. How many of you think you are a prompt engineer? Okay, but still, I think, by the way, if you haven't played in the world of prompts, you must go and play in the world of prompts. It is really exciting. Maybe you'll go down but I think it's a very interesting way, because this large language model, it really will answer based upon what you give it. And I think the whole game is how do you actually sophisticate the world. So but the interesting thing is that we believe that programming has been reduced to something that is extremely simple. And if I am I am a business owner, I should be able to write my business logic literally, without doing programming. And that's really what we want to be able to make possible. And I want to be able to deploy it on the platforms that everybody uses, like a WhatsApp or whatever. So that's really the thought process of where these things go. We need to have, the other thing is we need to have locally relevant models. And I think something that's very important. And I think that voice is how we talk. And I think that voice and building that, combining voice with these large language models and those which work in all Indian languages. By the way, just before, just so that I should just give this thing, I was advisor to what was the Bhashini project, and we basically developed a whole bunch of Indian language AI tools, the pre-LLM AI tools that actually work on all Indian languages. And I think that now we need to move this thing to the LLM world and create basically device-based things that work, that has language models. And then of course you need to be able to have infrastructure as well as to run these things efficiently. Now one of the things that I can say is that these models, if you build a smaller large language model, it can be a couple of orders magnitude smaller than maybe what the largest Gen AI models are, but still they require a very significant amount of compute, and you need to continuously optimize right down to the GPU level. Right? So therefore, if we are to be a country which is going to leverage this whole Gen AI space, we need to play in all the stacks, right down from how do you make leverages the GPUs the best, to how do you actually make models that are relevant to solve Indian problems the best, and of course how do you get everybody to use this in the best possible way. And I think that's I will leave on this positive note. Thank you.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, please continue.
No, I know, you know better than I do that China has developed ErnieBot, which is like ChatGPT. Where are we in India in creating a ChatGPT kind of stuff? Given all the languages and all. Of course, ChatGPT itself handles many languages, but where are we?
So let me just say this, that, and we are still in stealth mode, but let me just say this, that one of the things that we felt that there needs to be this thing coming out of India. And for the longest time, I've been working in government and open source projects for 15 years. I just said that I need to go and just do this because it was not possible to do this in the non-profit and because things are moving so fast. So there are, as I said, I'm leading a team which is aiming to do this. There are others too, but I think that we hope to announce certain things on this in the coming months. Okay.
So if there are no more questions, the final question.
I want you to differentiate between ChatGPT, Bard, Bing, and Copilot. Which one do you suggest to use? And shall we start on that? Second question would be: shall we start on the project to make it relevant for including language capability which we have and more text in different languages available? So should we not have a center for that? Yeah.
No. So I think generative AI and the impact of it and the using of it is something very, very important. And somehow as part of this community and as part of the country, we have to figure out how to come together to put this, because it's a lot of people who need to come together. Many of the ingredients are there, and I tell you, as far as this is, India is a rich country, so we have to figure out how to get our act together to do this. But yeah, so I think that, and you were asking about the differences between the different models. See, every day a new model comes, right? So therefore, if I would like to say from the history, there was, ChatGPT came out, then, OpenAI itself released GPT-4, which is significantly better. Then the whole open source thing came, starting with Llama and Llama 2 from Meta, and which actually I think are very nice models. For example, Abu Dhabi released what was known as the Falcon model, which is a large language model, which for a while was among the best in the world. And so therefore, and China has so many large language models that are there, coming out there that are. Now each country obviously does it. China is certainly looking at Chinese being the first thing, and so therefore I think the large language models that come out of India will be focused on Indian languages. And I think, despite the fact that we are now, in a commercial entity, I say that the first model we create, we will open source because we think it's important. And maybe we'll ask people, have you ever given ChatGPT a paradox and asked whether it is right or wrong? This is but they are pretty clever, you should try it out. I think, but as kids, I think this is a great. How many of you know what a paradox is? Can someone give an example of a paradox? Yes, what's the paradox? Okay.
For example, we travel back in time and unfortunately if our grandfather dies, so will we be born? That's a paradox. So time travel itself is a paradox to the past.
Okay.
I think we should move on to the discussion during lunch.
Yeah.
We want to follow.
No. So I'm not aware of that specific barber. No, basically a barber. Yeah.
He shaves everybody else.
Okay. Who?
And he will not shave.
Okay.
So who shaves the barber?
Yeah. So an example given here of a paradox is that everybody goes to the barber to look for a shave, but the barber never shaves themselves. So the question is, who shaves the barbers? That's a yeah.
So with that interesting thought, we break for lunch, and we really thank Vivek for a really fascinating, exciting talk. And on behalf of IITACB, I request Narayan Murthy sir to. No problem. Thank you.
We'd also like to thank our session chairs in the morning, Professor Narayan and Professor Jayesh Bellare. Jayesh, where are you? Ashok, would you? For Jayesh. And let me do the honors. Thank you so much. Lunch is served, it's downstairs. And we need you all back in exactly 45 minutes. Is that a done deal? 2 o'clock is just half an hour. Okay.
So let's move on to session 3. And session 3 has 3 talks. No? Session 3 has 3 talks. 2 are online and 1 is in person. And this session will be chaired by Professor Kaustuv Sanyan from JNC.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the post-lunch session. The first speaker. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you sit down? Hello. Sit down. Please settle down. Okay, welcome back.
Quickly, huh? Speaker is waiting. Please settle down quickly. And please do not whisper, huh? Thanks.
Okay, the first speaker of this session is Harshit Agarwal. He works in the space of AI and art for decades, and he is joining us online. Harshit, it's to you now.
Nonetheless, like very excited to be speaking with all of you on this wonderful day of AI programming. And what I will be sharing is more sort of my work and experiments in the creativity domain. So thinking of machine learning, AI. Making art, making spaces of play or more fun engagements to create new ways of engaging with cultural artifacts, and also making new kinds of tools for enabling larger people to like engage with this. And art and technology have had like a back and forth relationship for pretty much since the beginning, right? Like when the first photography like experiments started happening and the cameras started coming out. Up to that point, artists had this sort of role of capturing reality to the best extent possible. But now that you had cameras, artists were in some sense, it didn't like stop art from existing or artists from existing, right? Because their primary job was in some ways replaced by another technical device, but instead it liberated artists to like create new kinds of artistic forms like abstraction and surrealism, and you have all kinds of beautiful art movements sort of that pretty much came out after the fact that photography started to exist. So in some ways, yeah, art technology definitely creates this new kinds of art that can be created, and in some ways that's my exploration with AI. And then just to go back to the photography example, like photography itself became like a fine art form. So starting to show some of the work that I've been doing over the years in this space of technology and art. So one of the first projects in early 2014-15 I did was called Flying Pantograph, which was basically a drawing interactive experience, but here you were drawing with a drone. So you could sort of move a controller or a stylus or a pen, something to sort of indicate what you wanted to draw on a table surface, and the drone would mimic that drawing on a far off canvas, sort of replicating that motion on this new canvas surface, right? So in some ways it liberated you from the constraints of your body, and you could sort of draw it into more places, draw larger scale, artworks and so on. And you have to also form like a relationship with the drone. Like it has its own like ways of outputting the strokes because of its motion dynamics, etc. So you have to sort of build that connection with the drone. So that was still kind of physical augmentation. Now sort of talking more about intelligence-based augmentation of creativity. So just before I jump into some of the artworks, like I'm sure like through the day you'll be hearing about neural networks and how AI systems work a lot. But just to give like a very quick sample of that, you kind of create a system where you're teaching the machine different ways of perceiving the world around itself, right? Like it's able to identify objects. And in some simplistic way, if you were to kind of reverse that process, you could start getting the machine to create stuff or start cleaning up stuff, as they say it, or hallucinating stuff, right? So in some ways, that's how we also kind of create stuff. We kind of observe the world around us, and once we start combining different parts of that knowledge, we start like sort of sparking kind of creative expression. So I started like thinking about this, and one of the first works in the AI art space that I did was called Tandem, which was a simple drawing system, but here like you do something, and once you let the machine imagine on top of that, it would sort of see things within that you probably didn't expect. So most of us would like, in this example, like think of the left side input as this feather pen dipped in an ink bottle, but the machine kind of interpreted that as this bird, right? And in this case, most of us would think of the left side image as these leafless trees in a deserted land, but the machine kind of imagined them as these dogs with large ears. And so it sort of started to move from the machine's role of simply like, you know, making your circle more correct or your lines more smoother, to more creative kind of partnership that you could build, where the machine is reinterpreting your inputs in certain ways that could like create or spark new kinds of thoughts for you. So this is kind of just a demonstration of how the system works. You start doing whatever you want to sort of create, and you can create a pencil sketch with the machine out of it, or like a more colored outcome. And yeah, this was sort of exhibited at different places. So moving on to this idea of like, often when I speak of AI and art, like oftentimes the question comes that, you know, there is no materiality in terms of how you would think of these digitally native artworks. But in some ways, to draw this analogy, like just like an artist who works with paint and paint brushes, like paint is their raw material that they work with, and a sort of paint brushes become the tool to manipulate that material into artworks. Similarly, for someone working in the AI art space, like data would be the raw material that you work with, and you use algorithms like GANs, generative adversarial networks, or diffusion models, or whatever the algorithms you're using to kind of manipulate that data into some kind of outcomes that you want to make artistically and aesthetically. And an example like artwork that kind of demonstrates this is this work I did with two collaborators, Strangers, where we were thinking of this question of how do people in India perceive gender visually. So we started by collecting data sets from people, asking them to draw standing female and standing male form. And these, inputs or data points itself were quite fascinating. But then what I did was train an AI model on that data to create sort of new stick figure outcomes from that data input, and also train another model to kind of classify any input drawing into how much percentage female the machine thought that drawing was, based on the original data that people had submitted. So again, now sort of the new AI outcomes, we kind of pass through this classification model to assign a score to the AI outcomes of how much percentage female they are. So just as a representation, like 100%, 80% female, and so on. And then sort of 100% female and the outermost radius being 0% female. And it's very interesting, like this kind of artwork wouldn't be possible to do without humans or the machines like working together, right? So humans kind of making this input of the data that their perception of gender or their visual perception of gender is, but then the machines with their unique ability now to like process large amounts of data, creating these artifacts that then become sort of this artwork, and also like even though people kind of drew binary representations of gender forms, but kind of when collectively it sort of became this spectrum of outputs. So yeah, these kind of new like forms of art start emerging. This is another work that I did called Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Edward. This was done a bit earlier in 2018, whereas I basically worked with surgical data, surgical dissections, and exposed the machine to that, and again using generative adversarial networks kind of created that work, and very much inspired by one of Rembrandt's earliest works called The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tull, and just fun fact, like both of us did this work when we were 26, so some kind of existential thinking starts happening, I think, around that time. But also this work was exhibited at one of the first AI art shows in the contemporary gallery, and it was at Nature Mont Gallery in New Delhi, which was quite exciting to have contemporary galleries sort of starting to think and incorporate AI art in their programming. This other work called Mass Reality is an interactive work, again thinking of new kinds of artwork. So instead of static like works, could you use the strength of technology to kind of create more dynamic real-time work. So here basically a person's facial structure is understood, and then based on two AI models that are trained to transform that facial structure into these two performance forms, Kathakali and Thalyam, and this happens in real time through like a webcam system that looks at an audience face and does this. So this is how it looks in sort of an exhibition setting, where here like my face is being tracked and sort of I'm kind of embodying these two performance forms simultaneously, and also kind of thinking a bit through this work. Kind of like facial recognition systems have started to be deployed very vastly in kind of surveillance activities across the world, and even for doing things like predictive policing and so on. But as an artist, I'm also interested in thinking of how the same technologies could be used for altogether completely different kind of uses, right? Where it becomes a medium for you to experience certain art forms, but also to like place these two forms together, so you become both of them simultaneously. Where Thalyam and Kathakali over the years have had, traditionally at least, have had a difference in like who can perform and who can view that dance form, right? So now you sort of start kind of breaking your social boundaries and collapsing them for any individual to kind of embody both the forms together. Another work that I did around early last year was this work called Unstill Life, which is basically here I was looking at more sort of thinking of okay, I'm able to teach machines certain visual concepts, but can I teach it sort of more detailed like differences in aesthetic concepts of compositional and painterly, right? So taking like the same data set of still life paintings, which are a popular art form, especially in the European kind of artistic movements where you paint like flower paintings and so on. So here like taking the same data set but treating it in two very different ways, where one AI learns to, for one time the AI learns the entirety of the artworks, and the second time it learns sort of very zoomed in portions, and then sort of basically transforms from zoomed in to the full composition and back to sort of zoomed in painterly artifacts, and continues doing that in kind of a cyclical fashion. So again, like sort of similar kind of artworks that have existed become or are treated in very different ways through the lens of what is possible with AI machine learning. This next work is more of a conceptual work where the idea was to engage the audience in this thinking of what is their agency when they work with AI, right? So here you start writing something, but then after about 15 seconds, the tip of the pen retracts and then comes back again, but now your hand is being controlled by the machine. So you just hold the pen and there's a magnetic system under the table that kind of moves your hand to write what the machine is thinking now. So here the machine is kind of trained on books of philosophy and poetry, so it reads the first few letters you wrote and then continues that text, but uses you as sort of the mechanical arm to continue that writing. So kind of reversing this relation between who is the thinking or the guiding entity and who is sort of executing the more mundane tasks. And that's kind of sort of also a direction which in general, it's an extreme interpretation, but a general direction in which one needs to be more critically aware of how machines are being used. And sort of this is another manifestation of that on a larger like wall, which was part of my solo exhibition that I did a couple of years ago in Calcutta. This next work is a virtual reality work where you put on sort of these headsets and you become part of this land. Basically, you enter this land, which is a poppy plantation. But here, once you sort of look around, you see that everything in this land is made up of videos, and these videos are actually advertisement videos on which most money was spent on Facebook over the last 2 years. So kind of like thinking of this phrase of digital colonization in some sense, or digital colonialism or data colonialism, where kind of, yeah, just like sort of we had colonization earlier where people took land as if it was for the taking, and poppy plantations, also like how Amita Ghosh writes in his books, Legacy of Poppies and so on, became such a like critical sort of mechanism for funding the growth of colonization. And in some ways, like, yeah, data and the advertisements that were fed through that data sort of aid this new age colonization to happen in some ways. So kind of drawing parallels between the two. This next work called The Past is Tense also looks at how yeah, like how AI or image manipulation systems can be used to like in some ways distort narratives or create narratives that kind of soothe certain sections of the society over the other and so on, and how like the spread of such narratives has also become so possible and so quick with all kinds of tools like social media platforms, WhatsApp and so on. So this is sort of an abstract version of that where I take like the milestone photograph of that and kind of reinterpret that in a different way using AI and done abstractly to kind of, yeah, not to kind of indicate what is possible but not necessarily create alternatives. And this work is actually a long video work. It's a 4-part video work, which I'll not show the whole thing, but the idea here was to like take this work and also like manifest it in this large cuboidal kind of structure, and very much inspired by a very early work called The Garden of Earthly Delights, which is a very famous triptych three-part painting, and sort of thinking of the idea of what a garden of delight today is. In some ways, the garden or the space of leisure has become a digital space today for all of us with social media and so on, where we kind of, whenever we feel a bit tired, we sort of open up our Instagram or something and sort of keep scrolling. So that's become the place of leisure, but that place of leisure also kind of enforces a sense of identity, a sense of filter bubble to happen. And so yeah, this video work, it's about a 4-minute video work which kind of captures this thinking of just creating some of these stories through that video. And was also very interesting for me, so I showed this work at the Habitat Center earlier this year, and I was fortunate to kind of capture this young person engaging with the work. Like they spent almost 40 minutes with the work, and just I think the digitally native kind of world that kids live in today and grow up in today, I think also seeing how art can kind of respond and transform to that, I think is interesting. And so moving a bit to like from some of my art examples to more like play examples. So there's a couple of projects I've been doing with Google Arts and Culture, which is a fascinating organization that kind of collects and digitizes cultural artifacts of the world and makes it accessible in an online manner, and also create some interesting, engaging like experiences around it. So here I've been working with a collection of Matchbox art that they have Indian Matchbox art labels, and then creating this game where you can basically, the idea is to go on a collector's journey where you kind of go through this whole process of reaching different marketplaces or bazaars where you would have, generally you would have sort of these collectible items, and once you land on any of these bazaars through this journey that you're on, you have a quiz that opens up that sort of makes you match different cutouts of matchboxes to the right matchbox, and you kind of collect that. So it becomes sort of a more fun way of like learning about Matchbox art, and it's a very fascinating topic of how matchboxes work, sort of the pop culture references, so to say, like they had matchboxes of Bollywood posters, of politics of that time, of the Indian independence struggle, of sports and so on. And then also, like, once you go on this journey, you also get like a custom machine learning plus sort of the original Matchbox hybrid artwork that I've created for all these categories. And it's also fascinating, yeah, to just as an artist specifically to see how different aesthetics can sort of be manifested through machine learning technologies. And this other artwork also where I'm working with Chutti artists who sort of paint Kathakali performers who paint their faces, and then you create sort of this interactive filter-like experience also with music added. So this is just a demonstration video of it. And this is moving sort of to the tools part. And this is the last bit, and then I'll wrap up with this. So this is actually a new tool that I've been working on. Also started with this idea that now that AI can create, like you have these systems where you can write a prompt and it creates some output. But a lot of us would have come across like these good morning messages on WhatsApp, right? And that's also a kind of creation that people are doing. And once you think of AI and sort of image making with these prompt-based systems like Midjourney, DALL-E, and so on, you are almost thinking that, yeah, this is sort of democratized creativity, right? But I started thinking about, like, yeah, let's say my parents who also share these good morning messages, can they sort of be enabled to create on their own, right? Instead of like forwarding some messages that they've received. So this is a system that kind of works within WhatsApp, and I'll share like the details of how to try it out if you feel interested. But just to give an example, like my father does some work in the apartment complex around green practices, and so he could create like an Independence Day message in the theme of that, all within WhatsApp that he could then sort of share out. So this kind of empowering of different kind of audiences also through AI is something that I'm deeply interested and excited by. Like my aunt could create this sort of birthday greeting for her grandson who likes cars, right? So some kind of custom, I'll skip this slide, but just sort of come here. So this is basically a number that you can use within WhatsApp to send a message, and then that message gets transformed into an image that you kind of can work with or use later. Just to end with some philosophical slides about art and creativity, because often the question comes like, can art be automated and so on. So these are not answers, but more just provocations. I would say that things like, yeah, like Peter sees the computer and he says that the machines only create what humans have taught it to, but his mom says that so do you. So maybe in some ways we are also kind of just remix machines. But then also there's beautiful code, especially with like text to image possibilities today, that says that things are not all savable and graspable on the whole as we like to believe, and mostly like most unsavable of all our works of art, where a space that words have not yet penetrated. So I think that sort of reductionist approach to thinking text to image is equivalent to art making may not be the most nuanced approach, and in some ways to say that AI has the same potential to automate creativity as the existence of cars has to automate walking. And finally this last slide, which I think is a fascinating conversation which happened on Twitter, where one researcher said that it may be that today's large neural networks are slightly conscious, to which someone responded in the same sense, that it may be a large field of fetus like Italy pasta. And yeah, so this is pretty much it. It was a packed sort of share out of some of the works that I've been doing. And if there are any questions or comments, I'd love to take them. Thank you.
Thanks, Harshit. Any questions? It's on, yeah. Any questions?
Check.
It seems there are no more questions. There are no questions. Yeah.
So one of the things I saw was your garden of fascination or whatever you call it. So that means you can project any art in that place and keep changing it as you go along. Where the child was walking. Hello? No.
I couldn't hear the question. If you could repeat that.
Okay.
I can't hear if it's being spoken from far off. So I think.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. We'll close it here and we'll go for the next one. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Sivaramakrishnan Narayan from Bristlecone, and he's going to talk about AI in manufacturing.
Hello. Sir, 25. Thank you all. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. There are so many industry leaders and stalwarts here. So I'll start with a small personal anecdote. 30 years back, like many other young boys and girls in Bangalore, I had ambitions of working with Infosys. I wrote the entrance exam. They had an entrance exam at that time. I cleared it. I interviewed with Mr. N.S. Raghavan and Mr. N.R.N. who is sitting here. Thank you, sir. Honored to be here. I don't think I got most of the questions right, but he must have seen something in me that he gave me the job. So I worked for a year. This was the time I can say that Infosys was not yet in the IPO stage. And I left for my education later. I had the privilege of working with you, sir, and with Nandan. And amazing experience which has set me on a career that finds me here today presenting to him again. And I'm just overwhelmed, tongue-tied, and feeling a little bit like an imposter here. So with that, let me start. The task I have is kind of diametrically opposite to the presentation that you went through earlier. AI in manufacturing, right? And manufacturing is all about the practical world, the real world. So there isn't any creativity that I'm going to talk about. This is going to be a set of experiences that I've had. Some of it, my learnings in a sense. So there could be things that are not all perfect, not all aligned with the way theoretical worlds work. But it is my perspective, my experience of what I have seen. So, this doesn't work. Okay. So, I'm going to cover a few use cases, and like I said, this is my experience, right? And I'm going to keep it very simple because one, there is a very diverse audience, people with decades of experience in academia, industry, and people who are just about starting. So I was a little conflicted as to what I put on screen or on the slide. So you will see the slides are very, very basic, right? The intent is not to talk you through the slide, the intent is to share my experience. So we've seen AI in multiple forms today, we use it in multiple ways. We use Google search all the time, and nowadays ChatGPT is all the rage. We use recommendations in multiple engines like YouTube, Netflix, and so on. We are all familiar with all of this. We use junk filters on email to sort out our junk. So we don't even think about how the computer, which is essentially a programmed object, recognizes what is junk and what is not. How does it know what you feel is junk, right? And those things we don't think about anymore. And of course, we always read about news articles on how chess prodigies are getting beaten by the computer and so on and so forth. So it has been in existence in popular consciousness for a while now. Specifically in manufacturing, it is slightly more recent but not very. Robots we are all familiar with. We've seen factories, any factory image that you see on any of the image search websites, you will find that there is a robot, doing something, welding, assembling, whatever. But we are going to cover 3-4 use cases today, which I just picked off a very popular and high-profile consulting's website, right? It is just for the sake of illustration. So we will go through these 4-5 use cases about product systems and product feature optimization, which is talking about physical products, not software products. We are going to talk a little bit about production scheduling, again a very complicated topic, complex topic. Product quality monitoring in very brief, and machine and asset maintenance. And again, there is no logic for selecting these 4. There could be multiple other topics, like for example, can we use AI in sustainability as one example? Can we use AI in procurement? So each of these are areas which open up the rabbit hole in a sense, but I'm just going to cover these 4 today. So first and foremost, product design. So those of you who have some familiarity with how a product manufacturing process goes, you see there is a whole host of data that comes in, and this is something that will appear again and again in my presentation today. Data. right? Where does the data reside? What kind of data do you have? Because I read it in a HBR article some time ago, AI, if nothing else, is statistics at scale, right? So if you have the ability to bring multiple very diverse data points together and figure out the connections between all of them, you can potentially predict what will happen next. And this is the theme. I'm oversimplifying and generalizing at this point in time, but as long as you have data, you can be reasonably assured that there is some possibility of understanding what may happen. So you have a lot of data, historical information, what kind of designs have you done in the past, what kind of manufacturing and quality data do you have from your manufacturing shop floor, field data. So if your product goes out in the field, like a car goes out into the field and keeps frequently breaking down. Like I used to work in Ashok Leyland a long time back, and one of the problems they had was the engine used to seize. It was always the second cylinder that used to seize, and they did some amount of root cause analysis, and they found that because the drivers were pouring water from the local ponds on the highway, muddy water used to get into the engine for the cooling, and then mud used to get stuck and the engine wouldn't get cooled, right? And these kind of things are what comes out of the field data. So as long as you fixed the source of the problem, so make the bore of the hole a little wider or whatever, it is possible to understand what needs to be done from a product design point of view. And of course, market data, competitive information. You ingest all this data, and then you build product features, right? You build things that make your product unique in a certain way or better for the user to use in a certain way. And you test these features, right? You simulate what will happen. Now, these are all part of the design process today. So you do the testing, you do the optimization, you remove whatever is unnecessary, you think whatever is necessary you keep, and then you assemble it into the prototype. These are all very standard steps in this product design process. You troubleshoot the prototype, you do a performance testing, optimization of the product itself as a whole, and this whole thing broadly completes the product design process. Now, where does AI come in all of this? What happens is you take all this data, and it's possible for you to put this entire thing in what is called a digital twin, which is basically, shorn of the jargon. It means that if I had all the data that went into all of these steps, and I was able to simulate it in a computer, tell the computer that if this happens, this is likely to happen. So if you heat a product too much, then you have to spend more time in curing it or putting it into heat treatment, or if you do very stressful machining on a product, then you'll have to spend more time heat treating it. If you have to allow the product to be rust resistant, you will have to do certain types of coating. These are very obvious and very simple examples, but more intricate and more hidden examples can come out of this entire digital twin process. And that's where the computer can shine, because it can bring out patterns you never knew before. And knowing those patterns for a product designer makes it a lot more easier for him or her to predict what may happen, what needs to be taken care of, and how can they be taken care of. So this is one of the technologies that people use very often in manufacturing, digital twin, particularly where upstream processes, particularly in chemical industries, particularly in metal processing industries, the upstream process tends to have a huge influence on what happens downstream. So again, those of you who have done 10th standard science, you would have seen this carbon steel diagram, right, about the temperatures in a furnace and various other things. So the level to which you take your furnace affects the quality of the product that comes out at the end, right? So if you know that your temperature ranges are not all right at the beginning, then your outcome will also be accordingly not all right. In what sense they will not be all right? That will be different for different grades of steel. So those parameters, the input parameters which essentially get captured in the machine, in the computer at the beginning, can then predict you what is going to come out at the end, and that's something that is very important from a digital twin point of view. Okay. I'll come to the second use case that I'm talking about, manufacturing scheduling. And pardon me, I have 25 minutes, so I'm going to zip through this, wait for questions at the end of it if that is okay. Now, the manufacturing scheduling is actually part of a very complex set of processes. So you have, again, at the beginning, a lot of data that comes in, from the vendor, from the market, from your own historical trends, your own capacities of manufacturing and whatnot, the customer demand and what kind of new products are you going to launch, demand for older products, and all of this gets ingested. You do an overall supply chain planning, right? And those of you who are familiar, supply chain, basically the simple problem is to match demand to supply, or match supply to demand, whichever way you want to look at it. So if you have toothpaste to sell or tea to sell, you will know that this area, Bangalore, has a certain demand, and this many kgs of tea or this many tubes of toothpaste has to be sold in Bangalore. More than this will result in pile-up of inventory. So that is broadly the supply chain planning aspect. But in the middle of it all, there is a factory planning, right? So you've now decided all markets how much of supply you will give, say of tea or toothpaste or whatever your product is. Which factory should manufacture it? How far will you manufacture it from the source of demand? Because that will impact your cost of transportation and so on. Of course, you have parameters for quality, parameters for the machines, how do they operate, what kind of productivities you establish, and the sequencing, right? And sequencing, again, is a very intricate topic. I will not get into it right now, but it's one of the crucial parameters of how the manufacturing planning really works, which leads to inventory planning. Where should I deploy, how much of inventory, and so on and so forth. How should I ship my material, where should I stock them, and how does it reach my customers, right? We all like to have tea every day, so it has to be at a retail shop every day, but there is a whole engine that runs behind all of this. And again, the digital twin. Sorry, I seem to be having some problem with this. Yeah. So again, the digital twin plays a very important role in this. That sense that if you have bottlenecks in any of these node points, say for your supply chain planning, you're sensing that your ability to supply might be limited, or your inventory planning, your inventories deployed are lower because of festive season, or some band happened. Because of that, your inventories are running low. So you need to consider all these constraints and then go back into the digital twin, feed the scenario in a sense. Right? If I'm not getting supply, some cyclone happened somewhere, somebody's vendor supplies are getting affected because of some local disturbances. So all of that can be modeled into this twin. You can understand what is the upstream and downstream correlations, right? What happens upstream, how does it impact the factory and the factory scheduling. And it is also possible for us to model the machine parameters around it, right? To understand if a machine is broken down, if a machine is misperforming, underperforming, then what should I do? How should I modify my plan so that overall my factory runs as scheduled or as planned? And that's a critical part of it. The digital twin plays a large role in that again. I'm again simplifying it, keeping it very high level. There is a lot to it than simply putting a box and saying all of this is part of digital twin. Right? There is a lot more that goes behind this. Product quality. I'll give you a quick couple of examples. Many of you have two-wheelers. A lot of those two-wheelers have stickers outside, right? On the sides of this two-wheeler, in the front you have a small little logo. How many of us have paused and thought about what happens if the color combination of the stickers is incorrect? What happens if the logo is fixed upside down, right? Now, there are workers on the floor. I visited a two-wheeler factory here near Kolar a few weeks ago. There is an army of workers who look at these two-wheelers as they are rolling off the line to make sure that the stickers, I mean, if it is black, then I need a red and yellow combination on the side. If it is blue, then I need a blue and silver combination, and so on. So the stickers are different, the branding is different. The logo, of course, has a certain orientation you have to fix it with. All of this is done manually today, and of course, if the worker misses because of eye fatigue or whatever, it's that much harder. Another example I can give you is those of us who have cars, we like the car's surface to be nice and shiny and smooth. I visited an automotive factory, again, nearby here in Bangalore, where the workers come every day in the morning and build a muscle memory. They take their hand, they place it on a weighing scale, and press it till the weighing scale reads 2.5 kilos. Okay, so that pressure they build like 20-25 times. They press the weighing scale till the muscle memory is in their hand, and that's the pressure they apply on the car with a white glove to touch the car and see whether there are any dents or bumps on the car surface. Right? That's the kind of thing that goes on in quality. Now, this is an easy thing for a computer to do. It can, I mean, there are multiple techniques. I won't get into that. But the point is, some of these are very engineering-specific solutions which can give you better quality outcomes. And using the material spec, sorry, this thing is misbehaving a bit. Sorry. The finished goods parameters and the customer service parameters. It is possible for us to identify areas in which. Sorry. So this one essentially is what I have written there is Internet of Things and computer vision. So you can actually connect up multiple devices that look at vendor components, understand whether those vendor components are adequate in quality or not. And wherever it is possible to pass it, it will pass it. Digital twin I have already mentioned. So you can actually capture the process specs. Like one of the key measurements of manufacturing process reliability is something called CP/CPK. CP/CPK is essentially a statistical quality control measure, and it has to be within a certain range for you to say that this is okay. Now, it is possible with digital twin again to predict what will happen in the next step based on the parameters of the previous one. So there the digital twin will act, and the finished goods again based on customer service and the finished goods specs. It is possible for us to capture what is happening at the finished goods level. I mean, today if you go to an automobile assembly line, you will see something like a cage which has like maybe 100-150 tube lights, right? Powerful tube lights. The vehicle is passing through it, the workers are in the middle of that cage, and they check the vehicle for any visual defects, and that's the kind of light they need to put on the vehicle for them to make sure. Now you can imagine the eye strain of the workers that are standing there, and they're there for 8 hours each shift. The eye strain is tremendous. So if there is a way that we can eliminate or alleviate this kind of stress for the workers, I think everybody would be better off. Not to replace them, of course. I mean, somebody, I think I read a couple of days ago, said that people using AI will replace people that are not using AI. AI will not replace people. But those people that are familiar with, comfortable with using AI, will replace people that are not. So the future does belong to those who have the skills in artificial intelligence and applying it into various business applications such as this. The last, augmented machine maintenance. So, I mean, typical machine maintenance are driven by OEM manuals, maintenance policies of the organization, of course the maintenance personnel that you deploy on the various machines, and of course the machine logs that come out of the machines themselves. So you look at all of these data and you figure out what you want to do in terms of maintenance. Sorry, I think again some problem. So what I'm saying here is it is possible for us to read all these machines. Like, I'll give you an example. This may not illustrate it. So I was working in a big refinery up in North India, and you know, the refinery has like literally kilometers of pipeline, and the pipelines have valves and various other control features to enable the flow or stoppage of the gas or the refined oil that is going through it, refined petroleum. So it was difficult for the new maintenance team, which was all, you know, they were all young engineers, 24, 25 years old. They had no prior knowledge of what is going on in the pipeline. They had no understanding of the OEM equipment. But it was critical. Without the pipelines, the refinery would stop. So the OEM actually created at that time, this I'm talking about 2005, 2006, a video which was running on their computers. I mean, iPads were not yet prevalent then. They created video instructions of what is going on in the pipeline and what kind of maintenance has to be done on the valve or any other control equipment that was on the pipeline, along with the maintenance manual that was integrated into that video, right? So they used to point out to the figure and say, this is what this part is about, this is what you need to do to maintain it. And the OEM actually gave them all these videos. Now, we collected all these videos, put them in a library. This is pre-AI, right? Pre-AI, what we could do. Now, just imagine there is a computer now that enables you to identify the content of these videos, to merge the video content along with the drawings, the engineering drawings and the maintenance drawings, and throw out a set of instructions to an engineer who is 24, 25 years old to do what he has to do or she has to do on the field. This kind of power with the engineer, now today it is on iPad, you know, the solution is kind of taken off. It's become a massive hit with the client because of the usability of the solution. All we did was bring together multiple things, and it was a constrained environment where young engineers did not know what to do. The solution kind of addressed that problem, and today they run around with iPads all over their field. All these kilometers of pipeline are still maintained and running, and the technology is now far advanced than what we started off with. So it is a journey, and in many cases, bringing in the computer into the maintenance, into the business process, actually enables the business process to function a lot better. So I hope I gave you a quick overview of what this is all about, how using AI in manufacturing has helped, and shared some of my examples, my experiences here. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. See whether we have questions. Any questions from front?
So in the manufacturing sector, the buzzword normally is better, faster, cheaper, you know, and that's how your profitability goes up as we go along. So with AI, which of these three are most affected in that order? If you can tell me, is it better, is it faster, is it cheaper? Which is the order in which?
So both in the order of priority for business, better is the first, I would say. Faster, it's still garbage in, garbage out. So the more garbage you shovel in, the faster the garbage comes out. So I would put it as the last. So better, cheaper and faster would be the order in which I would go.
But are educational institutions teaching the kind of knowledge they should be teaching to prepare the workforce for the kind of work that you're talking about? I mean, are our colleges, our schools, we don't seem to be there yet. So what is the...
So, good question, ma'am. I would say yes and no. Yes. Actually it's a hard question to answer. Let me try my best. So we do a lot of statistics. A lot of our students, and I keep, both my boys are just about entering university, and one of the things I keep telling them is never let go of mathematics, you know, whatever else you do. So one of my kids is doing economics and the other guy has just finished his graduation in mathematics. But both are in touch with mathematics. So my advice or suggestion to children who are going into college would be to understand that math forms something of a bedrock science, right? So you need to have that. I see things like biostatistics, bioinformatics in colleges now. So a lot of biology students, I mean, when I studied, biology was a subject you went to if you didn't like maths and physics. But that's no more the case, right? You have to learn mathematics. So in that sense, there is a certain emphasis in mathematics that is coming in, which I think is good. You know, even, both my sons, I am an engineer MBA, and both my sons declared one day that they will never do an engineering or an MBA. So that's how far kids are going these days, right? So even if you're not interested in an engineering degree, even a science degree, you need mathematics. That is one. Are they teaching enough of it? My answer is probably not, right? Those kids that are naturally inclined towards numerals, mathematics and so on, numeracy skills, I think they do a greater job of it. But what is happening in technology is, and technology has this habit of meeting you more than halfway. So a lot of the stuff that is coming out now are intended for use by people who are not able to understand what's going on, right? To kind of make it, they call it democratization, various words are there, but it is more usable in a very simple way. So technology then will meet some of these demands. But it is important for kids to be sensitive and accepting that this will help them. That fear has to go. Again, institutions are not doing a great job. This is my personal view.
Sir, I just wanted to understand, you showed the two patches of digital twins.
So now if you have an AI box, how do you couple it to the digital twin actually, and where do you get the data to train it for your
Yeah, so good question. So the digital twin is not like a monolithic structure. So I've just taken it in the simple slide to show you that it can be encompassed as a digital twin. Now, what is a digital twin in a manufacturing context is you typically have at the highest level a supply chain planning tool. So you get the demand from the market, you plan at that level. Then you have a factory planning, which is the next layer. And then you have a manufacturing execution system, which is the next layer, which is basically all the programmable logic controllers and the supervisory control systems that are sitting on the machines. So you take the data from them, you understand what is going on the machine, then model it back into the factory planning, saying, okay, I had to manufacture 500 pieces of this product yesterday, but I only ended up manufacturing 320. So the remaining 180 are still to be planned, so the factory planning takes care of it in the next planning run. Why the 180 did not get manufactured is answered by the manufacturing execution system. Was it a material problem, machine problem, quality issue, workers didn't work, productivity was down? There could be any number of reasons. So all of that comes out of the manufacturing execution system. So you take the data from all of this, you put it in what we call today a data lake. It is like an enormous collection of all the data that you are working with in the factory. The data lake is just a storehouse, you can think of it like that, everything is in that. You then have to build algorithms, intelligence and so on, which then tells you that these pieces of data correlate to this. You had a worker issue yesterday, absenteeism for example, and you have 180 pieces short. And it could change, as you can imagine. One day it could be a machine issue, one day it could be absenteeism, another day it could be vendor didn't supply. So any of these different reasons can correlate ultimately to a loss of production. And then you figure out how often are these problems happening and what should I do then, what is my action? Should I take care of absenteeism? Is that higher problem or is it a vendor material issue? In which case I have to tackle the vendor quality problem. So it gives you that kind of direction. So when I say digital twin, and there are more or less all the time what in economics they call the lead indicator, right? Something happens first and then following that a series of events happen. So when you catch that initial event, it is possible for you to predict that the next may happen and this may not, this may happen and this may not happen. And that prediction is what I call as digital twin in a box.
Okay, one more question in the back.
Hello, good evening. This is Jeeva.
Hi.
I understood that an AI manages the entire life cycle of a product, isn't it?
Sorry, I can't hear you too clearly.
Okay. The AI helps in managing the entire life cycle of a product.
Yes.
Once the life cycle of a product is done, it's complete. Say if the life cycle of a car is done. So after the life cycle, we are going to scrape it, right? So once when we, at the time of scraping, is there any AI or, which helps to reuse whatever present in that product, or if it's so, how long kind of?
Very good question. So not for a product that is engineering as complex as a car, but these days companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever have started accepting what they call the extended supply chain responsibility, accountability, whatever you want to call it. So if you use if you use a product like a toothpaste or a toothbrush, and today you must have read in the newspapers that toothbrushes cause a lot of microplastics to go into the sea, right? And we all regularly use toothbrush and throw it in the waste bin and it goes away. So they're saying that if you finish using anything, a shaving canister, a shaving blade, a toothbrush, toothpaste, you give it back to me. As a manufacturer, I will take it back and I will recycle it, right? Now the question is, when you send out material from your factory to the end consumer, it is from one large factory to many millions of customers like ourselves. But when many million customers have to send it back to one single factory, how do you achieve that? Right? So it's still, in a sense, a reverse supply chain discussion that is going on. I don't think there is any definitive answer yet. But the answer on a more complex product like a car is, the government is bringing in a rule saying, vehicles older than 15 years have to be scrapped. There are technologies available today called telemetry, which can tell you how many kilometers your car has run, what is the wear and tear of the various parts of your car and so on, which is very useful for the people in the logistics industry. But it can also be used for this kind of end-use application, saying if your car has run more than 150,000 kilometers, it's good as scrap, you have to sell it, you have to throw it away. So it is possible for somebody, maybe with suitable protections, the regulatory authority like an RTO or somebody, to understand how many cars are there in the city area that are older than 15 years, that have been registered in the year of 2008 or earlier, and then call those people back using the same methods. Trace the car, send a message to the current owner and say, get your car back, it is good as scrap. So answer is yes, but it's not yet a full developed solution or something that we can use readily.
Thank you. Let's Mr. Narayanan once more for a fascinating
Thank you.
talk. I request Professor Mishra to hand over this. So I'll go there. So our next talk will be given by Sudipto Ghosh from PwC, and he will be joining us online. Hello, Mr. Ghosh.
Yes, I can hear you. Hope you are able to hear me all right.
I can hear you fine. So the stage is to you. So we can start. Yeah.
So I just have the slide to show. Can you tell me if you are able to see my screen? You can see the screen. Oh. Wonderful. Okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Sudipto Ghosh. I'm a partner in PwC India, and I lead the data and analytics practice, and also I look after the manufacturing vertical. I wanted to take the next 20-25 minutes on the subject of AI-enabled next-gen supply chain. I will try to share my thoughts in the next 20 minutes or so, 20-25 minutes. And then if there are any questions, we will take that up at the end. What I wanted to cover was clear 5 things. Setting the context in terms of what are we hearing from organizations in terms of their decision-making process as far as supply chain is concerned. I'll talk a little bit about building a resilient supply chain using a digital twin. Then I will also try and cover the concept of demand sensing in addition to demand forecasting for anticipating changes. We all know the challenges around unknown unknowns, so I'll cover a little bit about anomaly detection. And last but not the least, I will briefly touch upon the understanding of behavioral patterns from transactional data using process mining. If you are unable to hear me or you cannot see anything, just let me know, because I will not be able to see all of you, so you will have to tell me if you are not able to hear me or not able to see my screen. Perfect. So in terms of setting up the context, what we do is that we conduct a lot of surveys with our clients. Typically these are supply chain leaders, COOs, and there is a lot of themes which have come out in a very consistent manner. And this slide shows some of those. And what we have seen is that most of the organizations are talking about resilience flexibility and efficiency of the supply chain. Efficiency was always very important anyways, but what has changed the narrative a little bit is a lot of focus on can you introduce more resilience in your supply chain, and that might mean that you may have to possibly trade off, to have some trade-offs, and that might increase some costs, but you still may want to go for it. The other consistent theme which has come across is that this function, supply chain function, has become very critical, and many organizations are actually talking about digitizing the end-to-end process, looking at the visibility of the entire chain from end to end, and also looking at improving the entire integrated planning. So those are some of the key things which we are hearing from our clients and from the industry leaders. Now in that backdrop, because the subject is AI and supply chain, I thought I will share with you some of the cutting edge experiences which we are hearing and we are doing for our clients. So the first one I wanted to talk about was understanding the external disruptions. So when we are looking at a supply chain is can get disrupted in any of these four categories. So there could be a disruption because of an unexpected change in the demand. That unexpected change in the demand could be because of a geopolitical reason, could be because of an external environment, could be because of competitor action, and many other things. And hence that introduces a good amount of disruption or changing patterns and behaviors of customers. In addition to a demand disruption, you can have logistics disruptions. Now that is something which can happen, and we have seen that happening where your supply chains are not as reliable, or they take more time, or if your supply chain is very complex and cuts across multiple territories or countries, then it's very vulnerable to those disruptions. We have also seen supplier disruptions. So for example, particularly if you are importing raw material from a different country, then the vulnerability is even more. Even if you are not, there is the possibility that the suppliers may just go out of business or may not be able to serve you and all that. So supply disruption is a real challenge. And then last but not the least is disruption around the production processes, where there could be unexpected breakdowns or there could be challenges around the people and that can cause challenges. So there are four different categories of disruptions. Now when we are talking about the digital twin, the starting point of a digital twin, and I'll take a bit of an example here, which is a fairly simplified example, although the slide might look a little more complex and busy looking. But if you see from left side, you have suppliers, and then the suppliers are supplying, and there is a stocking point up, and we have I have just made the supply chain a little more representative, like you are importing from 2 different countries. And then of course you have a stocking point which is there in India for the raw material. The production and the finished goods is happening in India, and then it is being shipped to other countries who are your customers, and the finished warehouse and products are over there. Now in each of these points where either there is production or there is a stocking, there are different parameters which you can capture as by way of your digital twin. So you can you will have information about the reorder point, about the initial inventories, about the time it takes to move from point A to B, and also you will have a demand pattern which you can simulate. And then with these initial conditions, you can create a model which would effectively simulate the entire functioning of the supply chain. Now, an additional interesting thing which you can do is that you can introduce stochasticity in the entire supply chain. So, for example, if you have a lead time of 5 days, say from always likely that every shipment will exactly happen in 5 days. Some shipments can happen on 6 days and some can happen on 4 days. So there is always going to be a stochasticity or a variability, even just for the lead times. And if you look at the frequency distribution of that, you may be able to see whether it is a normal distribution or any other distribution. And for any kind of such distribution, you will know what is the mean and what is the median of that distribution. So in a simulation model, you get data based on your own understanding, and that makes the digital twin a little more realistic. So when you overlay the stochasticity with the norms of the supply chain along with the demand pattern, then you are able to look at some of the key matrices or outputs from this. So what you can do is that you can look at the service levels as one output, and you can look at the inventories at different stocking points as another output, and you can pretty much measure that for every simulation run what has been the service level and what are the inventory levels, right? And you will be surprised to see that because of the stochasticity itself, even if there are no external disruptions, your service levels are not going to be very consistent, because you would find the variability. And what you can see there is that you will have a possibility that, in this example, you can see that we are looking at a service level where you are achieving a figure of 97% in 60% of the cases, right? And then you also have the raw material inventory levels, and what you can also do is that you can look at a realistic scenario, an optimistic and a pessimistic scenario, and then you can see that whether you are going to hit a stop out at any point in time. Now, there are two things you can do here. One is that even before you have introduced disruption, you can see that if I am able to reduce the variability or reduce the sigma of lead time, then how does that impact in terms of my service levels, right? And the other option you can do is that you can reduce the mean value. So for example, if it takes 5 days for you to ship, can I reduce the mean time to 4 days or 3 days, and that will help me. Now, almost mathematically, you can do these multiple options and see the impact of that in terms of your service levels and inventory positions. Once you have done all of that, what you can then do is that you can introduce disruptions. So I talked about the 4 disruptions, 4 categories of disruptions in the previous slide. So what you can do here is that you can say that, well, a disruption would mean that a certain raw material could not arrive on time, right? And once you simulate that, then you know that if today the raw material is not shipped, then there is a time to impact, or what we call as a TTI, which gives you the leeway for the next maybe 5 days or 6 days for you to do something. But beyond that, you will not be able to fulfill and meet the demand of the customer. Now, when you are introducing multiple disruptions, you will find that there will be few nodes where it will be very, very vulnerable in terms of the inventory position. And once you're able to find those nodes, then you know that, well, if you have to debottleneck your supply chain, then those are the areas where you need to intervene. Another important thing, interesting thing which you can do is you can look at the different factors which is influencing some of your say customer service or service levels. And in this example, suppose you are looking at looking at capacities at 2 points, and you are looking at lead times for 2 suppliers. It will give you which particular input variable has the highest predictive power or correlation with your service level. So that way you can also look at if you have to debottleneck a capacity, or you have to increase or reduce the lead time, which areas or which suppliers you need to deal with first, right? And then you can use a decision tree based model, or models which you can use, which can figure out the causality between the input and the output variables. Another interesting thing which you can do is that when you are looking at the time to impact across suppliers, and time to impact typically means if a supply stops, then what is the impact and how severe that impact is. Typically, you would be looking at suppliers and you will be focusing on suppliers which have a very low time to impact, which means that you have to almost immediately do something, and these are the vulnerable cases. However, there are suppliers where the time to impact would be very high, which means that you can possibly relax a little bit there, and you can negotiate with them, and you can look at some of the cost saving opportunities. The slide on the right hand side is an interesting one because when you're looking at the impact, some of the low value items can have a higher impact if it is kind of causing significant losses. So the spend can be low for the supplier, but if the performance impact is high, then these are some of the hidden risks which you need to be looking at. So what I wanted to say is that this is a framework where you are creating a digital replica of the supply chain. You are creating or generating synthetic data by running a simulation. Then you are doing a mathematical modeling and an AI-based analysis on the synthetic data. You are then trying to find out what are the cause and effect, which factors have a maximum impact. You are also trying to find out which points in the supply chain are more vulnerable than the others, and you are also looking at debottlenecking the capacity and the suppliers based on these analyses. So that is one application of AI in terms of improving the resilience of your supply chain. All heard about demand forecasting, but what essentially happens is that the demand has got two aspects to it. One is the outside in perspective, which is usually missed out, and that outside in perspective is where there is a lot of unstructured data which is available in the public domain. Sometimes they're available from the databases which organizations subscribe to. Sometimes it is available from analyst reviews and other experts who give their comment. And of course, you also have a lot of structured data which comes from external sources as well. And when you look at all that, and of course, talking about generative AI as well, which also simplifies some of these abilities because you can streamline the search and the summarization in a very large, unstructured, text-based data set, and then you can use that for generating alerts, which will have, or that they will have an impact from a demand perspective, right? So this is the framework which you use for sensing the demand, and then once you have sensed the demand, that goes as an input into your forecasting model. So in addition to all your data sources and your historical data and your data about events and data about promotions and everything else, you incorporate that, and that helps you to have a more balanced demand forecasting, where you're looking at both the outside in perspective as well as the inside out perspective, and combining the two makes your forecasting process sentient or more adaptable. And that is something which we are seeing many organizations doing. We are also working with a few organizations in this space. So that is another impact or aspect where AI is being used heavily for understanding the demand a lot better. Now if I move on to the next one, we all know that you would always have something which is not going right. So there could be anomalies. There could be anomalies when you are doing a procurement. There could be anomalies when you are doing a quality management processes, where you are looking at defects. There could be anomalies when you are looking at the behavior of your customers. So this is one subject or one area which is critical because some of the disruptions or hidden disruptions start featuring in by just looking at what is happening a little differently. So AI and advanced modeling techniques help you to detect some of these anomalies. So typically you face a few challenges. So some of the challenges are that data could be stored only in one place and not in an integrated manner. Control mechanisms could be very manual in nature. Some of the known risks are all fine, but people find out a way to figure out and I would not say bypass, but address some of those known risks. But you are more interested in something which is unknown for you, because that is where some of your biggest risks would come from. So looking for the unknown unknowns, and also the cost of compliance is something which is increasing, and you would like to address it. So, what we have done is that we have seen there is a possibility for you to do an AI-driven anomaly detection. And this is almost like a horizontal platform. You can apply this in multiple points in your supply chain. What it effectively does, it looks at unsupervised learning techniques. Because it is supervised, it helps you to detect the unknown unknowns. Now, every unknown may not be a problem because you still need to overlay that data from the perspective of your domain knowledge. And the beauty is that once you have said that this outlier is not a bad outlier, the machine learning algorithms takes over and then they don't flag that in the subsequent analysis, right? The other aspect of this unknown unknowns is the explainability of the model. So typically, most of these unsupervised learning techniques can potentially become very black box in nature. You will not be able to understand why something has been thrown as an anomaly. So what organizations have been doing, and we have also been helping them, is to use either natural language processing or large language models for them to explain why a particular point or why a particular data set is looking anomalous. So you are using Gen AI for explaining the reason for the anomaly, so that it is easily understood by somebody who's not very technical or very mathematically oriented. So it's a combination of unsupervised learning with Gen AI coming together to give you an easy to use solution where you can continuously track and see the anomalies coming in across your supply chain, and if you are able to address them, then you will be able to run a fairly smooth operations across the entire chain, right? And you can do invoice monitoring, you can do procurement, you can do predictive maintenance, you can reduce the cost of poor quality, you can figure out the golden batch, multiple things can be done. The last one which I would like to call out is what we are seeing is from a process mining perspective. So now what happens is that in any transactional system or across the whole supply chain, you have multiple transactions which are happening. It is possible now for you to look at that entire transactional data, look at the log data, the timestamp of every transaction, and reconstruct the process from beginning till end by looking at the timestamps and helping you to find out what is the end-to-end flow transaction by transaction, and that is a great way to see the transaction will happen. It's your entire supply chain. Right? What it does is that it helps you doing three things. The first thing it does is that it helps you to identify whether there are any process variants. So are you doing everything in the same way, or there are multiple exceptions which you are applying in the system? And if there are too many exceptions which are applied, then you know that your processes are not standardized and there is an opportunity for you to standardize the process. The second thing it allows you to do is to look at what is the turnaround time or the end-to-end time it takes for you to complete a transaction. So production, bill, supply, and everything. possibility is of bottlenecks and sorry, okay, sure. No, I'm in that. So across the whole chain and all of some of those steps so that you have picked up the right places when you get to the digitization, right? So that's how you can look at some of the stuff which I said. So basically, what I wanted to talk about and summarize is that we are seeing a huge amount of application of AI in the entire supply chain, right from the point of view of addressing efficiency, resilience, understanding of the behaviors, looking at the anomalies, and trying to improve the entire effectiveness of the end-to-end chain. And I thought I will just give you a very quick glimpse of some of the examples or use cases of how AI is now being used very effectively for addressing some of the business issues which organizations are facing as far as their supply chain is concerned. So I'll take a pause and if there is any question in a minute, I'll be more than happy to answer.
We are taking questions. Thank you so much for your nice presentation. We are unable to take any questions because of the audio-visual problems, but thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope that this has given you some thoughts and ideas to take forward. Thank you very much. Thanks.
So back to you.
So thank you, Professor Sanyal. So requesting Professor Mishra to hand over a small memento to our session chair. To the session chair. So we'll take a short tea break for 10 minutes and we'll reassemble for the last session, that is session 4.
So the topic for the conversation discussion is AI in medical diagnostics. Medical diagnostics is a subject that I am familiar with because I run a technology company in the medical diagnostics space. And this is an area that is being radically transformed by AI and will continue to be transformed by AI. So to start with, just wanted to tell you a few of the important areas where AI is already having an impact or likely to have an impact within medical diagnostics. The first is clinical and genomic data analysis. Clinical analysis is simply a visit to the doctor where notes are taken, an electronic health record is created. All of this clinical information itself is going to be subject to a lot of AI. Genomic data analysis, your gene sequence results can be subject to AI. The most classical use case of AI is actually computer vision, which is used in both pathology and radiology. So X-rays, CT scans, slides, all of these are subject to image processing and hence to deep learning based AI today, and pathology as I already mentioned. So what was done in the past? All of this was done by human beings, as you know. Your doctor gave you your diagnosis by feeling your pulse and maybe looking at your test results, talking to you. So that's still the gold standard. And I think one thing we have to remember, even at the end of this talk, that nobody is talking about replacing doctors. We're talking about augmenting doctors, and I think that is the key part of AI actually being successful, is that humans, at this point, 2023, are still the gold standard. So we need humans to be augmented by AI. But of course, there's not that many skilled human beings available, and that's why I think AI becomes very relevant and it can work 24/7. The second thing from a technical point of view that's important to note is that there is traditional image processing and there is AI. Traditional image processing used geometric features, used mathematics, etc. to do a lot of image processing. That entire field has been wiped out effectively by AI today. And if you talk to many academics who are in traditional image processing, they will say that 20 or 30 years of their work has suddenly been replaced and it's not relevant anymore. So there is a very drastic shift happening all around us because of this. A few terms that are important and also to understand why is this happening right now. So one is obviously the algorithms and a few terms that get thrown around a lot. Machine learning, deep learning, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, etc. I'm guessing the previous speakers have talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But really, the relevant part of this, as far as medical diagnostics is concerned, is deep learning. I think deep learning, which has basically multiple layers of neural networks, at least 3, and some of the deep learning algorithms like convolutional neural networks, and most recently transformers, these are what is radically changing the field of medical diagnostics. The other important part is, of course, hardware. Many of you probably have heard of a company called NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has become extraordinarily famous over the last 3 or 4 years, partly because they are the major maker of these graphical processing units. These are the hardware that enable you to do these very resource-intensive tasks. So both algorithms and hardware, this is something that has developed over the last decade. Now, what type of problems can we solve, right? So there's lots of problems. Honestly, there's literally hundreds of problems that can be solved. They're all many interesting use cases. But I just want to kind of give you a sense of the 4 important classes of problems. One is actually pathology or imaging kind of problems, and we'll talk mainly about that. That's where most of the use cases are, that you have an image of some tissue sample or a blood slide or whatever, and you want to extract certain features from it. That's the most common use case, I would say, of deep learning. But there's others as well which are quite interesting. There is speech recognition, right? So today we're talking about maybe even talking into your phone, correct? And maybe being able to identify early Parkinson's, for example. Coughing into your phone and identifying COVID, right? These are things which are not so far away, and lots of studies have happened, of course, because of COVID on things like this. So speech recognition is one class of problems. Image processing is another class. The EHR, the electronic health record, which is a combination of several different kinds of data. It could be text notes the doctor makes. It could be your ECG. It could be your smart watch. All of these things put together, right? Can you dump that into an AI and extract useful information from it? So this is actually quite a lot of natural language processing as well included in this. And then there's time series analysis. Time series analysis is like ECG data, where you have maybe data against time, and you are trying to extract interesting features which can potentially predict a heart attack, for example. Right? And today, so many people are wearing smart watches which have basic ECG kind of features on them. So could you use these kind of algorithms to identify a heart attack that is oncoming? So that's something that, as you can imagine, has a very big impact. So these are few different classes of problems: image processing, time series, natural language processing, as well as speech recognition. 4 broad categories or classes of problems. So why should you use AI? Okay. One of the obvious ones, early detection, like we talked about. Your watch does the detection before you feel something and you have to go to the doctor. So that's an obvious advantage in a healthcare situation, to detect an event, a serious event early on. More accurate. Now I put an asterisk marks here because more accurate means compared to what, right? So in general today, the gold standard is still the human being. But what if the human being themselves is wrong? And this is almost now sort of a very gray area thing that we are going to learn more and more about. So there's an asterisk marks here. I think today we still will defer to the judgment of the human being finally. But in general, at many of these tasks, AI is obviously very accurate, more accurate than most human beings, let's say, but maybe not as accurate as the best human beings. It's 24/7, goes without saying, it's a program. The other interesting thing about lots of these convolutional neural networks and so on is they can learn features without being explicitly trained. So you don't have to say to it that, look, this is a node or a nodule or this is some cancerous tissue or something. As long as you give it the final output that this is a cancerous patient, it is able to extract features from images. So it's able to learn these features without us explicitly training it, which is obviously a huge advantage because we may not even be able to articulate all the possible features that are there to be learned. It gets better over time, another important thing, so it learns by seeing more and more images, so it's going to get better over time. It's faster, obviously, especially at repetitive tasks where human beings can tire. It's going to be much faster and more repeatable. Finally, we all hope it's going to be a lot cheaper as well. So, just going to some specific use cases. One very interesting use case in cancer pathology is actually checkpoint inhibitors. Checkpoint inhibitors are a class of drugs that actually bind to and not to the others. Okay? So it doesn't work for everybody. You need to find you need to find those patients that have a threshold amount of PD-L1, okay? So at least 1% of their tumor cells, right? If you have 100 tumor cells, at least one tumor cell has to be displaying PD-L1 in order for the doctor to prescribe this to you. The challenge is that many non-tumor cells can also show this PD-L1, correct? Now, this is what an actual image looks like, okay? So we can't even tell as lay people what this is. But trained pathologists are able to look at this, look at certain features and say, no, that's a tumor cell, this is not a tumor cell, etc. But even they can get tired. Now, where deep learning helps is to accurately quantify these thresholds and report this TPS score, basically the tumor prediction score. And this is from a journal article 2019, where it was done on over 600 cases and was able to, with a greater than 98% accuracy, identify correctly the number of tumor cells. So this is something which could aid in cancer therapy, basically making sure the right people get the right cancer drug. So this is one application. The second one is again in radiology. So that was pathology or histopathology, which is tissue slides taken and looked at under a microscope. This is radiology. Radiology is, modalities like X-rays, CT and so on. So here is an X-ray of a TB patient shown here on the left. And this is a very active area because you want to be able to detect pulmonary TB of the lung from these chest X-rays. What's the problem? The problem is we don't have enough trained radiologists in places like India where the maximum TB caseload is, especially maybe in tier 2, tier 3 parts of India where we don't have enough of these radiologists. So how does deep learning help? A convolutional neural network was able to detect TB on over 1,000 cases with a sensitivity of 97% and a specificity of 100%. That means if somebody didn't have TB, it was able to 100% accurately classify those cases, and those that had TB, it was able to pick up 97.3 of them compared to the gold standard. So as you can imagine, that's a very attractive thing to have, that all you need is someone that takes the X-ray, and now this deep learning algorithm using a convolutional neural network is able to classify and pick up those TB cases. The third one, I'm telling you, there's 100 examples here, especially all of you students. You can yourself formulate 10 problem statements today. So what's the third problem? I thought this was very interesting. There is a field called dysmorphology. Dysmorphology means that when people have certain genetic defects, their facial features have certain, what shall we call it, dysmorphologies. They don't conform to certain geometric parameters, right? Their eyes might be very close to each other, for example, or their nose may be overly flat, or there might be all of these things. So this is, as you can imagine, quite a subjective area. However, there are people called dysmorphologists who are able to, by looking at the face of a person, and why is this important, especially for young children, you want to be able to classify them appropriately so that you can give them the right treatment when they were quite young and not let them get into problems later on. So this is a profession that, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of dysmorphologists around. But there is this algorithm, Deep Gestalt, was able to successfully classify 105 different genetic disorders just by looking at the face of some infants. So this is highly transformative because you don't have to go do an expensive genetic test, for example. Just by looking at the image of someone, you can imagine this is an app on your phone that an image is taken, and that could then predict with some probability what the likelihood of you having some sort of genetic disorder is. So this is another example of deep learning. So moving to where are we today, it's a very active area. In fact, I purposely did not pick any company examples so that I'm not going to be accused of picking one over the other. Everything that I've picked is an academic example. You can go look up those papers. The FDA today has approved over 200 technologies, and many more are likely in the pipeline. For Indian companies, I think it's a particularly attractive area given our prowess in software. I think this is something that a lot of Indian companies are already into, where we have products across pathology, ophthalmology, speech recognition, radiology, and really your imagination is the limit to the AI problems that you can solve. So I think it's a very active area. I encourage all of you students to go take a look at some of this. So what are some of the challenges? One is lack of comprehensive data sets, and a lot of the data sets that are used are Western data sets. So that leads to also the potential of bias. For example, skin color could play a big role, and there might not be, let's say, enough Indian or brown-skinned people in an image processed, image data set, for example. So lack of comprehensive data sets. Commercially, the biggest challenge is incorporation into current workflows. A busy lab has people working in a certain way, in a certain workflow. And now you're introducing something which is disruptive. And they don't want to abandon altogether their old way of doing it. So how do you put in your software into that current workflow without disrupting? I think this is a practical challenge that many companies in this space face, because you can't get rid of the old ways completely, because you still need the human to confirm maybe with an image. So you have to incorporate into current workflows. As you can imagine, there's a lot of resistance. Radiology is considered one of the highest paying medical professions. So you can imagine the resistance over there because of the fear of job loss, potentially, if AI comes in. So I think one solution to a lot of this is AI versus IA. What is IA? Intelligent augmentation. And I think personally chess is the best example because of seeing what intelligent augmentation can do. The best chess programs started beating the best human beings by the mid-1990s. But chess has not disappeared. In fact, it's only become much more popular as a sport because human beings have found ways of using computers intelligently to augment themselves and their knowledge. So I think it's the same thing in medical diagnostics. We need to have intelligent augmentation, that's IA versus AI. What are some of the important future trends? Lots of us wearing wearables, like I said, smartwatches, other things on your skin. And if you integrate that with AI, you can have this continuous time series analysis of what's going on with your health. Many interesting studies going on, and which show, for instance, that we have different baselines for different human beings. I think one of the challenges with medical diagnostics today is you say, oh, my cholesterol level is above a certain number and hence I have a problem. But you might just have a different baseline. So what is your baseline? You want to be able to measure it against that. So that's where wearables and continuous measurement and AI on top of that could really give you a lot of personalized healthcare information. And I think that's where we're going to be moving towards, is that. What are some of the ethical and legal problems? I think bias, like I already mentioned, racial bias, maybe gender bias, there could be so many other things that could influence and worsen the accuracy of these algorithms. So you have to be very clear, and I think when you go to the FDA with a submission, for example, they want you to show all sorts of data sets that can allay those concerns. Data privacy, as you can imagine, we are using data sets of people around us. So are we sure that their data has been anonymized? Regulatory standards, again, the US FDA is probably the gold standard here. But even there is a lot of gray areas, and I think India probably has still a long way to go in terms of coming up with regulatory standards for something like this. But we need improved regulatory standards that can understand the power of these algorithms. So, in conclusion, I think AI is obviously here to stay. It's only going to expand in scope. Working with humans rather than replacing them, I think that is what will enable widespread adoption. There are significant challenges, especially in collecting data, and because of that, the analysis and bias that creeps in. I think specifically in India, we need a lot more large-scale consortia, and I think as we are moving to a slightly de-globalized world, you can see that people might not want to share their data sets so easily. The Western countries are already creating large data set consortia across their hospitals and so on. We need to do more of that ourselves so that we have data sets that can be useful to our patients and our skin type, our genetics, and so on. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is a multifaceted problem. I think we'll start with anonymization. I think consent is very important here. So today, when data is collected, ideally it should be with your consent, so that tomorrow, when a study is done, and somebody is applying a high ethical standard, they're able to go back and trace to a consent form, which, these are the kind of things that are important. Anyone doing a study in AI should definitely seek consent. And I think what we don't know today is what are all the future possibilities of this information. So writing your consent such that it can be as broad-based as possible, I think that's also important for someone trying to do such a study. That's one of the aspects that I feel is important, at least. Okay. Yes. 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 Technology, yeah. So I think one of the things that I was trying to say is that a lot of wearable devices which are continuously collecting data from us and hence establishing appropriate personalized baselines for each one of us, layered onto other information, all connected through EHRs, and this is going to be the toughest commercial problem. Somebody who's bringing together all of that and then making accurate predictions on top of that, That's where technologically this is going to. There's a lot of issues around, I think, who's going to implement it, regulatory standards, that how do people share data across platforms, etc. But I think this is all trending broadly towards being highly predictive, so that we're doing prognostic and not diagnostic, So for instance, can you predict a couple of years before somebody even has a stage 0 cancer that they're likely to develop it and they take appropriate precautions? Or likely to develop some lipid issues, for example, so that we're able to take action well in advance. I think that's broadly what you want to do in healthcare, is take action in advance, because things are going to break down. We just want to know sufficiently in advance. Yes. Yes. Correct. Right, yeah. Sure. So, got it. I think first of all, it will need two different kinds of data sets. You're talking about mammograms, for example, imaging data, but if you combine it with also some molecular data, data from your genes, etc., it could augment that information. What you're saying is 2 mammograms in a row did not reveal a growth. You still saw something later on. Is that what? Correct. Yes. So that's why I'm saying it can't be only based on mammograms. It has to maybe include other kinds of molecular information as well. So these data, different kinds of data are going to be needed to give an accurate diagnosis, not just relying on one, I would say. All right. Yes, please. Yeah, that's a very interesting. When you say psychological, are you talking about not neurological disorders? Okay. Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you read the newspapers. Somebody typed in suicide in Google the other day and they were actually identified, right? You're talking about things like that. Yeah, and you know what? Probably there's a Google algorithm sitting somewhere it's already using deep learning, which is enabled that thing to happen. So it's already happening. I just don't know how formalized these things are, you know, and are we catching every single one of them? Because obviously there are people that have access to this data and they could do it in a systematic way, but I don't know how systematic they are. Do they report everything? Why was that particular case found? Why not all the others? I don't know the answer to that. But certainly, in theory, it should be possible to identify people based on at least search histories, what they're doing, right? Yes. And I think phones are, by the way, great for this. I was talking about speech recognition. So that your speech contains lots of things about your mood as well, you know, and so on, which you may not immediately recognize. So maybe a futuristic kind of AI, by continuously microphone recording what you're saying, is able to predict some sort of mood swings and things like that. You know, these are all possible. These all sounded like science fiction things before, but they're more and more in the realm of possibility. You need lots of detailed data and studies to convincingly prove this. All right.
Thank you so much, Dhananjay. So before Surjo, if I can allow Professor Mishra and Mr. Narayan Murthy to give Dhananjay a little memento.
It's such a pleasure to give some time, and I know, I mean, his thought process, the way he presented, just extraordinary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So now we are coming to an end. We started with a solid house full, as we said, doors are breaking, standing room only, and that sort of thing. And I think, in my opinion, I have learned a lot. I was talking to Mr. Narayan Murthy, and he's saying he's learned a lot. So that says something about the quality of the speakers we got. One of the, well, like if I can say criticism or observation, maybe there are too many speakers on one day. Now we had planned it for 2 days, but then people said coming to Electronic City 2 days in a row with Bangalore traffic, too much. So we had to squeeze it in one day. But then the benefit was we got a number of areas of AI covered. So, and then we can take any of these forward as we go. The real champions are the people sitting in the back, the school kids. Please give them a big hand. And you don't have to stand up, I'll just name the kids from Jawahar School. Okay. Not Navodaya Vidyalaya, yes. So they have come. Then there are people from Indus School, some of them may have left. There are people from 10X International, also sister school of Indus. There are people from Vidya, I think the largest contingent. And there are college students from MVIT, SRM, and I think Ramya. So thank you for being here. Because one of the messages we want to pass on is that India has to keep on progressing in its science and technology, and you are the people who will take it forward. Our is finishing now, so you have to take us forward. I would like to, the two real champions of organizing this conference, two real champions. One is Sushila. I'd like to give her a memento. Thank you so much. She worked day and night to make it all happen. Not an easy task, I know, coordinating and, you know, and along with her it was, if you can give you, oh, you have one more? Okay. Okay. Along with it, this is not shared, but this is Professor Surya Sarthi Bose from IIT Bangalore. Both of them effortlessly, you know, smoothly organized the whole thing together. Thank you so much. And behind the scenes, if I may mention, behind the scenes to some extent, if I may use that word, is Sushmita Anand. All the beautiful design that you saw on the card and the word "Let us get AI" is her baby, you know. But everything will more. Thank you so much, Sushmita. So with this, I hand it over to the coordinators.
So, yeah. So can we give the memento to the session chair? Okay.
Yeah. So I'll just take a minute on behalf of the NASI, the National Academy of Sciences India. I'd like to thank Professor Ashok Mishra and his team for conducting this event. I think it was really a fantastic collection of talks, and really the experts in this field have addressed this. So my thanks to the entire team of the IITACB group as well, co-organizers of this, as well as the NASI local chapter, right, the Bangalore chapter of NASI. Yeah, and so also the Bombay chapter, which I represent in part, but here it is more on behalf of the headquarters of NASI and the Science and Society program of NASI, which has helped organize this. But of course, all the effort has been yours. So thank you very much, sir. And thanks to all of you to come. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll request Sushila to hand over the memento to our session chair. Yeah. So every session chair got one memento. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this session, and also it was a wonderful day with a lot of speakers. So let me thank Professor Ashok Mishra for putting this program together in such a short span of time. And let me thank also Sushila for being a constant companion for me to program this session. And Sushmita for putting together a lot of efforts in bringing up the card. However, the showstopper is here. So, yes, all the session chairs and the speakers. So I would like to thank all of them once again. And the showstopper is right here in front of us. So thanks for spending the whole day with us, sir. It was a wonderful day. Thank you. Thanks a lot.